You're now in the middle of a negotiation, and you have to decide what levers do you have to pull. Where's your leverage in the negotiation of the transaction? Typical transaction starts with whether it's an asset sale or a stock sale. Buyers will typically not want a stock sale because liabilities follow the company. So if there's not some type of undisclosed liability, there are customer claims, there perhaps lurking litigation, there's insurance claims on the business. If the buyer buys your company as a stock sale, then they typically take all of those liabilities with them. So as a general rule, but it's a very general rule, buyers will oftentimes like asset sales. Because when you take the assets of a company, the company's left behind, and whatever liabilities that company has are typically left with the company and with the seller. Another part of that is the tax consequences, because those tax consequences are real, and they're real to the buyer and they're real to the seller. We talked previously about getting a pro forma waterfall on what a sale transaction looks like. Your CPA can help you do that. They need to run a waterfall analysis to give you the idea whether or not you need to do an asset sale or a stock sale and what the consequences of that are. Once you get through that negotiation, you figure out which lever to pull. The purchase price will typically have three components. It'll have cash, debt, and equity. Very few transactions are just pure cash transactions. Most transactions involve some combination of cash, debt, and equity. When it comes to the cash, though, you have to evaluate what happens if you don't receive any more money in the transaction. What if there's no more debt payments coming? What if the equity that you have is worth zero at the end of the buyer's ownership of the company? Is the cash enough to hit your initial personal goals? Does it hit your estate planning goals? Does it allow you to retire? Does it allow you to reach whatever family goals that you have? Most transactions end up where the debt component or the equity component actually do have value. So I'm not suggesting that the buyers are going to default on that. But when you're evaluating the amount of cash that you get in a transaction, you need to evaluate that from the standpoint that your salary goes away, you're no longer drawing money out of the business because the buyer now owns the business. They may pay you a salary post-closing for a short period of time to transition some of the business. Typically that's 1 year. Oftentimes it'll go to 18 months, but not further. So the amount of cash that you get at closing plus a little bit of a salary as part of a transition is probably all the cash you're going to get until the note starts paying or until your equity pays off. So be mindful of the fact that the cash that you get at closing, whether or not it's enough that satisfies your personal financial goals and that of your family. It's all part of the negotiation. Buyers want to put as little cash on the table as they can, and they want to stretch out the payment on the note or the equity on the back end. You're in the middle of your negotiations. You found a buyer, you're willing to sell, you think there may be a transaction here. So you really are on the front end of the negotiation. Make no mistake, there are negotiating tactics that buyers use. Most buyers that are going to be interested in your company are going to be experienced buyers. They will have bought other companies before. That gives them experience and skill and practice. And this is a game. It's a negotiating game. And there are negotiating tactics that you have to utilize when selling your company. Those buyers, if they're an experienced buyer, they're going to have practiced techniques and skills and have experience in negotiating. And there's a variety of negotiating tactics that buyers will use. And it ranges from becoming your best friend. They take you to dinner. They tell you how good you are. They'll assign somebody to that relationship to make you feel good about a transaction. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't mean to imply that there's anything wrong with that. But that's one end of the spectrum. It's one end of the range. Another end of the range is a lot of times buyers will employ tactics that are hostile. They're adverse, they're adversarial. The trick to this is, the key to this is recognizing that there is a negotiation and it's a negotiating game. And so oftentimes mistakes sellers make is they react or overreact to a negotiating tactic that the buyer may have. The best advice that we can give is don't engage, take a step back. Recognize that there's a tactic going on here. And if you don't understand why a buyer's doing something, why it was nice and collegial and they were being friendly, and then all of a sudden some guy comes in and starts being more aggressive or more assertive, there's a reason why they're doing that. Take that step back and evaluate what is the negotiating tactic that the buyer is using and how do you respond to it instead of simply just reacting. Once you appreciate the fact that this is a negotiating game and that there are tactics that are being used on both sides, you're in a better position to respond instead of to react appropriately to make sure you get what you want in the transaction.